Hey, everybody. Today I have for you podcast number 031, and today's podcast is titled From Start to Finish. Hey, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. I'm Dr. Pete Lombardi, and this is the Limitless Life Network podcast where we flesh out all of the limitations that are preventing you from reaching your goals and living the life that you deserve. So, today I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. And I got to say, I absolutely love the feedback that I've been getting from some of you. So thank you for listening and thank you for the feedback. It makes me feel like actually all of this work that goes into producing a podcast is actually making a positive impact. So if you're finding this content helpful, be sure to please hit the subscribe button because, well, each subscriber actually helps us move up in the rankings, so that really helps out a lot too. I also love it when you leave a comment or even ask a question, and I will do my best to actually respond to those comments and those questions. I can't promise anything because sometimes I actually don't look into all the little details, and I try not to spend too much time doing this, but I will do my very best to do that. And there's no rule against sharing the podcast with somebody else or telling somebody else about this podcast. So if you get really bold and you want to go ahead, you could actually leave us a positive review because that also helps move us up in the rankings. And there's like this crazy little algorithm that AI probably uses. I don't even know how it works, but anyway, it gets this in front of more eyeballs and more ears. And that's really just a great way to try to help people to live a better life and to have more happiness, right? So, all right, on with the show. Today's podcast titled From Start to Finish. Where do I get these titles? I don't know. It just kind of comes to me. But here's the backstory. I just got back from a trip to Austin, Texas, which that is a great city, by the way, and it was not too bad of a travel, not too bad travel getting there either and coming back. So weather was perfect coming out of central New York. It was really nice there. So thank you, Austin, Texas, for having great weather. While I was there, I got to connect with a lot of fantastic people at this event that I was at. But I also got to see some old friends that I haven't seen in a while. I got to see my neighbor that used to live up here right next door to me, and he moved back to Austin, Texas. So I got to have lunch with him, and it was fantastic. I was also one of the biggest highlights was connecting with my oldest son, Nate, and his soon-to-be wife, his fiance, Sam, she is absolutely lovely. She's an absolute sweetheart. So that was fantastic. I got to spend a lot of time with them, and I really, really enjoyed it. Looking forward to the wedding. Anyway, so all of these connections and reunions made me reflect on actually how all the connections that I have with a lot of these other people have literally triggered so many other positive happenings in my life and the lives of other people. And so I was really reflecting on a lot of this stuff because it's really striking. For instance, I got to tell you about this one gentleman. I met him, I think, in 1997, and I was invited to a meeting at a radiology facility where it was sponsored by a local medical doctor. He's a neurologist, and I think he had some ownership stake in this MRI facility, which I don't know if that's a conflict of interest or not. But anyway, he invited all of the local chiropractors in the central New York area to come to this event, and it was going to be an event where we shared case studies. So all the chiropractors got an opportunity each month to share a case study in their practice that would be relevant to everybody. So the very first meeting, this chiropractor from a town next to ours, about 20 minutes away, decided to be the first presenter. And boy, was it a great presentation. It was such a great presentation that the neurologist that was hosting the event was kind of, I guess, I don't know if he was just didn't like the way it went or what, but it was extremely phenomenal as far as like the level of detail that this doctor, this chiropractor, put into his presentation. He had great video, great diagnostic procedures, and just a very unique case. And the positive outcome was all achieved through chiropractic care, which I think the neurologist may have been like, never seen something like that before. Anyway, after the presentation, I didn't know this guy from anybody, but I went up and introduced myself and said, hey, I not only did I love that, but I was kind of familiar with his mentor, where he learned a lot of his neurology background. And long story short, we ended up striking up a very solid relationship. We became very, very good friends, and he helped me out in my practice, but then I helped him out in his practice, and it turned out to be a tremendous friendship and relationship that I will forever cherish. But that in turn, he always talked about his buddy from the city. And his buddy from the city was kind of always this mysterious guy who was very New York City-ish, right? He had the very strong New York accent, and the New York accent guy happens to be a guest who we had on 2 weeks ago, Dr. Giannopoulos. So I actually met Dr. Giannopoulos through this other doctor, Dr. Culleton. And the two of them formed a company who we now use in our office called Read It, and they've moved into this whole realm of functional medicine. So now, why is this a big deal? Well, for years, I've always looked to those guys as experts as to things that I wasn't 100% clear on. They always seemed to either know the answer that I needed when it came to a question, or they knew somebody that did, and they would always bend over backwards to help me out. And likewise, the things that I was good at, I would always do anything to try to help them out. And as a result, it's just been a great symbiotic relationship. But it's triggered over, it's trickled down into helping my family, helping my kids through very challenging times. And we've always been there to try to support one another. And here I was at this event, and it really was because of Dr. Giannopoulos eventually inviting me to another group of where I met a couple other people that became some of my best friends to this very day. And that leads me to this deep reflection I had about looking at these guys that I've known for so many years, all the people that I've been introduced to because of how our relationships have blossomed. But then again, here's my son, my future daughter-in-law, and just all of a sudden it's becoming like generational, where this help and relationship building has just blossomed into just a really great experience in life, and it's just added such richness to life. So, long story short, let's get into these points, because number one is kind of, it sounds like obvious, but it is such an important point. And that is, in order to finish, we have to start. All right. So the title of the podcast is From Start to Finish. In order to finish, we have to start. And why would I state such an obvious thing? Of course, you have to start if you want to finish something. Well, because this is where many people really struggle. They struggle to begin things because they see all the potential struggle. They see all the potential problems. They see all the potential uncomfortableness. Sometimes it feels like, anxiousness starts to happen. And it makes me think back to when I was in high school, and I used to run track and field. And we had some really, really tough coaches. And if you've ever done a track and field workout where you're running repeat 400s, repeat 600 meters, they literally time your rest pretty close, and they're expecting a certain amount of effort every single time. And our coaches would never tell us how many times we were going to have to run. So you couldn't sit there and do the math of like how many more you had, the countdown or anything. It was always very ambiguous, like how long is he going to keep us here? And so you're putting out effort every time, and you get your 2 minutes worth of rest. And I remember one time sitting in practice, and not sitting, but trying to catch my breath. And one of my coaches, Coach Birch, was talking about the feeling that you get before starting a race. When you get into the starting blocks or you step up to the line, and that uncomfortable feeling, that pit in your stomach, that angst that you feel before the gun goes off. And it's even leading up to the race, you feel nervous, you feel jittery, but you have this just awful feeling in your stomach. And it makes it sound like, as I'm describing it, like, why would I ever run track and field? Why would anybody want to have that feeling? And he said, and I'll never forget it, and this has been, 30 plus years, he said that that's the same feeling you're going to get when you have to stand up and give a presentation in front of a group of people. That's the same feeling you're going to get before you go in front of a bank and ask them for a mortgage. That's the same feeling you're going to get when you have to do something like take a big examination that's going to be the career, your whole career hinges on this. There's all these times in your life where you have to stand up and do things if you want to accomplish something, and it's nerve-wracking. It's scary because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. But I always remember that when the gun went off, that feeling kind of dissipated, and my legs started moving real fast, and it was almost like that nervousness made me faster, it made me sharper, it made me quicker, and it just made me want to fight harder to the finish line. So as much as starting can be difficult, it's super, super critical that you don't avoid a start, that you actually go for it, and that you actually step up to the line and you take that challenge. The other part about starting, and I kind of correlate that, and I'm spending a little extra time on this number one, is that, coming into this world is not always easy. Being born is oftentimes just a real struggle. I mean, talk to a mother that's giving birth. She's going through one of the most painful things that she's probably ever experienced in her life, but the outcome is so beautiful in the end, or once the child is born. But and this week has just been. I came back to the office and got to adjust a newborn baby that was just born a couple days before, and that is such a blessing to check and adjust a newborn baby. And for those of you that have never heard of that, chiropractic care for a newborn baby, it's not something that we're doing because the baby has sciatic nerves pain or something like that. It's not because they have pain, but it has to do with balancing the nervous system, because the nervous system gets stressed during the birth process. Not just the mother gets stressed, but the baby can endure stress, and that stress can affect how the baby functions. So you're, the pediatrician and isn't really, trained in identifying that nervous system imbalance or the stress on the nervous system, nor are they trained in how to bring it back into a more harmonious balance or function. So it's something that I've just been really blessed with, the gift to be able to do that. So for some reason, that's why I seem to see a lot of babies and a lot of kids. So super blessed there. But anyway, point number two is the more you force something, the more difficult and frustrated you will become. So instead, you really want to just really focus on being patient and let things come to you. So where does this come from? This comes from, think about this. Like, you can't force a relationship to be great. You have to kind of let it breathe. You've got to kind of, see how it goes. Whenever we force a relationship, or we force a meeting, or we force something, like you're saying, oh, wow, I want to meet this person and this is what I want to get out of it. Like that's such a wrong approach. I can almost guarantee that will never work. But if you get into a situation where you can just meet somebody and be yourself, but also try just leading with like, hey, is there anything I can help you with? Is there anything you're looking at, that you think that maybe I could, help you achieve, or that you need any of my expertise in, or just how about listening? How about just using your ears and just seeing where it takes you? That's pretty cool. But like writing, you ever think about trying to force, like I got to sit down and I got to write something. I used to write a blog. I wrote a blog for over, I think, 10, 15 years. And some mornings I'd sit down and I'd be like, I don't know what I'm going to write about today. So if the more I tried to force it, the harder it became. So sometimes I just had to stop and, think about it for a little bit. Same thing with starting a podcast. Starting the podcast today is like, I'm not sure what I'm going to carry on about today, but today I'm going to talk about, the very thing that I'm struggling with, which is what we need some content here, right? So instead of, like forcing it, and, I've thought about it all day, but nothing really came to me until I started to reflect a little bit more. And that's the thing. We all need time to reflect, but if you're just trying to push too hard, it's not going to come to you. So, be patient and let some things come to you once in a while. All right. So point number 3 is be open to the person that's in front of you, because you never know what you could be in store for. This, I got to tell you about this story, because it was at the end of this this seminar that I went to. They had a reception, and I was talking to some of my usual friends that were there because I just love seeing them. But then I saw Dr. Culleton and Dr. Giannopoulos were both talking to the same person. I didn't recognize her at all. So I decided to go over and just kind of listen in and see what they were talking about. And eventually they told me what she did. And I struck up a conversation with her. And she, just kind of was listening to what I do. And I was listening to what she does. And she gave me some great advice. And that advice I just kind of shared with you in point number 2. And that is, when you have a great idea, sometimes you need to let it breathe. And for me, what I was thinking about was what this podcast is all about, what all my blogs have been all about. And I was trying to think, like, where am I going with this? What am I going to try to accomplish with this? And she said, you're a really good storyteller. And I think you have a lot of stories to tell. And I think in those stories, there's some really great lessons. And I said, well, that's kind of what I always do, is I tell stories and there's great lessons. And she said, I think you need to write a book. And I'm like, well, what's that going to be like? And she's like, just think about it. There's a legacy story here that you need to tell. And I'm not sure what it is, but just think about it for a while. Spend some time in reflection over it. And I thought to myself, I think she's onto something, but how in the world did I meet this woman? But she really was very intuitive there, and I was very appreciative to that. So you never know. I never knew, walking up to Dr. Culleton after his presentation, that we were going to become lifelong friends, and that he was going to introduce me to so many other people, and so on and so forth. But you just never know. And some relationships you're certainly glad to get away from. But be open to what's going to happen. So point number 4 is, the comfort zone is where your dreams die. Oof. That sounds harsh, because we all love to stay comfortable, don't we? We all love to, just kind of do our routine and get into our habits. But, just changing a location, changing a rhythm and a routine can sometimes be enough to just trigger a new opportunity. Sometimes I drive to work a different way. I just take a totally different route. It may take longer, but I'll do it just to see. Maybe it's new scenery, or maybe it's a new site that just triggers a thought. Who knows? Or maybe it's just extra time listening to whatever I'm listening to that allows me the opportunity to develop something new. Who knows? But I know this: outside of your comfort zone is where your dreams come to life. So, taking some chances once in a while is a good thing. Putting yourself out there is a good thing. Whenever you're feeling a bit nervous about going to do something, that's probably the thing you should probably go do, as long as it's not a dangerous situation or an illegal situation. I want to use that caveat. So I don't want you breaking laws and robbing banks or something like that, because that's totally off limits. Okay, don't want anybody going to jail. All right, so point number 5 is if you think you're finished, you're about to lose. And this is something that kind of goes with nothing kills success like success. A lot of times we get to the end of something, or we get to what we think is the culmination of all of our work, and then we dial back and we just kind of like rest on our laurels, and we just kind of like sit around and puff ourselves up and say, hey, look what I did. But the reality is that is a great opportunity for you to start to lose what you've not only accomplished, but you're no longer on the offensive, and you're really starting to let things slide. That's where you're really not focused on what life is all about. And life is about, adapting. Life is about growing. A plant doesn't just, a plant does. A plant eventually will grow and die, and that's our life here is limited with time, and we talk about that often on the podcast, is that, you only have a certain amount of time on this planet. But, if you think you're finished, you're about to lose. That also goes to, as a Christian, that's salvation. Like if you think that life on this earth is the only thing there is, that's, that's very limiting too. Life after death, is, for me, it's going to be in heaven, because, the only way to get there is to be a believer in Jesus Christ. And I am. So I know that I'm secure in that. And if you're not, then certainly, ask me some questions. I'd love to help you have that same type of confidence and that same type of peace in your life, because it has absolutely been the best decision I've ever made. So, without a doubt. So don't think that everything that you've gained in this world is for nothing. But also, the more you gain here, it really doesn't get you any further in eternity. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't keep working forward and trying to make a better impact, help more people, be a greater servant. Those are all things that are fantastic, and we want to see you living those dreams out for sure. So that's all I have for this week's edition of your weekly Limitless Life Network podcast. And I got to say thank you again for tuning in, and be sure to tune in next week, because I'm going to have another great podcast for you. I can guarantee that. And that way we can stay connected, be inspired, and keep moving toward your best life by stripping away your limitations. We'll see you next week.